Hi, welcome back to Midlife Dialogues. I'm going to do something different this time. My friends and I are always sharing notes about what's good to read or watch, and I thought I'd share some of my favorites. Maybe some of these will be interesting to some of you too. Okay, starting with books and audiobooks, I recently read The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff. This book is historical fiction and it is incredible. I listened to the audiobook version all in the same day, and I was very moved by this story. I will be thinking about it for quite a while. It's the story of a servant girl fleeing through the wintry woods from a very early colonial settlement. I was thinking Jamestown, although I don't remember if they actually named it. There was starvation and illness. Things were very bad there, and something happened, and she had to flee. She's being chased and going through this winter forest, and it's also a much bigger story about how to be alive and of several other themes as well. It's extraordinary writing. Highly recommend. Oh, also the ending. The ending. Oh my goodness. The ending blew me away. I just listened to North Woods by Daniel Mason, and it sort of works to read that after The Vaster Wilds. This book is about a young couple who take off from, again, an early American colony, and they end up living in a small cabin in the woods of what we learn later is Massachusetts. This story follows the inhabitants of that same house over the course of 4 centuries up to the present day, and all of the stories are so good. The book is structured around the seasons, which was an interesting way to write it. At one point, there is unexpectedly a ghost. The audiobook kept me company as I painted a room. I totally enjoyed this story about a land and a house and how its stories, passions, and people changed and didn't over the decades and centuries. If I reread it one day, which I might, I think I would read it next time in print to better take in all the different genres represented in the different sections. There are parts with letters, poetry, journal entries, and then just narrative, but I don't at all regret having listened to the well-presented audiobook. I highly recommend. It's by the author of The Piano Tuner, Daniel Mason. Now, Tom Lake by Ann Patchett is set on a family's cherry farm in Traverse City, Michigan in the vague present. I also listened to this one as an audiobook. I guess I listen to a lot of audiobooks, don't I? But that was really good because it's narrated by Meryl Streep. So good, both the story and the narration. It seems like rather a small story when you summarize it. A woman is telling her 3 daughters about a time in her past when she dated someone who went on to become a famous actor. But it is so well done and satisfying. The novel moves back and forth between her storytelling in the present on the cherry farm to the past and to the time she's remembering. It didn't sound that interesting to me, but I love Ann Patchett's writing, so I went for it, and it did not disappoint. It's very well written and interesting. I really enjoyed it. Now some shows. Here's an older one, Last Tango in Halifax. This has a great cast. If you enjoy English shows, it seems like there are maybe like 12 or 15 actors, and they just shift around and recombine in different groupings for each new show, which is really kind of fun if you like those actors. And these are 4 of those actors: Sarah Lancashire, Nicola Walker, Anne Reid, and Derek Jacobi. They are all just amazing in this program. Last Tango in Halifax is about 2 70-something people who had been smitten with each other as teenagers, but they went their separate ways and married other people. Each had a daughter. Now they're in their 70s and widowed, and they meet again through social media, and they get married. It's based on the story of the writer's mother. It's set in Yorkshire in England, and that's lovely to see. It's one of those shows where you really get to know the main characters, Alan and Celia and their families. There are a lot of interesting personalities. A lot of stuff goes on, and over the seasons, you feel as though you really know these people. It's really a fun show, and I really recommend it. It started in 2013. There were 4 seasons, and then it ended, and many years later, another season popped up, which was really unexpected by me anyway, and really fun. It was set several years later, so that was neat because you got to see all these people a few years later. The kids were bigger, older, you got to see what changed. It was like checking back in on people you hadn't been in touch with for a while, and I really enjoyed that. Another show I really enjoy is the Graham Norton Show out of England. It's a talk show. There in England, they call it a chat show. And he has his guests, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 stars, come out and sit on the big red couch all at the same time. not one at a time like most of our talk shows do. So it's really a lot of fun because they're all interacting with each other. Also, most everybody's got a drink in their hand. So it's loose and funny and really a lot of fun to watch. Lots of laughing. You can watch full episodes on YouTube. One of Graham Norton's most popular guests, and she's on that show a lot, is Miriam Margolyes, who is an English actress. In fact, she played Professor Sprout in Harry Potter. She is absolutely hilarious. She's an older woman who will say anything. She's very funny. I said she's English, but she's actually moved to Australia and become an Australian citizen. And that leads into the next show that I want to recommend, Almost Australian with Miriam Margolyes. This is a documentary she made in 2020. She spent 2 months traveling around Australia, talking to people about what it means to be Australian because she had just become a naturalized citizen. It's very good. It's just one season. There are 3-hour-long episodes. In the first episode, she talks to people about the Australian dream and what that is. In the second, she talks to people from every walk of life about mateship or friendship, Aussie style. In the final episode, she considers Australia and discusses it with people as the lucky country. It's on Netflix, and if you don't subscribe there, I think it is also on Canopy. This Is Us is a show that's been around for a long time now, and maybe you've watched it already, but if you haven't, I recommend it. It's a family drama which started in 2016 and it ran for 6 seasons. It starts with Jack and Rebecca, a couple that's pregnant with triplets in Pittsburgh. The actors and the acting is really good and the storylines are interesting. And what this show does is it bounces around in time, showing the lives of the 3 siblings who are the same age and their parents. Suddenly they're turning 30, and you see what everybody's doing. Then they're 5 years old again. There are flashbacks, there are flash forwards, even to new generations. Once you get to know the people, it's really satisfying. And the storyline is so well done because you understand more and more about the family and its story as you watch. I like that they chose kids to play the young siblings who look reasonably like the adults, so that really works. I think there are 3 different sets of these triplets in different age groups. I loved reading that along the way as they filmed, they sometimes filmed extra scenes for the finale. So the scenes they were filming didn't fit into anything they were currently filming. No one knew the full story of what these scenes were about, but they just did them. And then those scenes were tucked away for years because the director realized the child actors wouldn't have been the right ages anymore when they got to the end. And he wanted to have some of these flashbacks that were new scenes, but set in the past. It's a lot of fun. This Is Us streams on Netflix, Hulu, and NBC right now. Now I have 2 things you might be interested in on YouTube. Chateau Diaries is a vlog by a woman named Stephanie Jarvis. Years ago, Stephanie bought a 16th century chateau in the French countryside called Chateau de la Lande with a couple of friends. She has lived there ever since and been restoring it, and it is amazing. She has been capturing this in her vlogs, and it's really fun to watch. She has rooms available for guests. She also has volunteers who come and help with the house, the cooking, the gardens. It's a huge, beautiful home where they have a lot of fun. And I started watching the pandemic when they just locked down with the core group of people who were there. And that was fun to watch when life wasn't very fun in a lot of places. Nowadays, there are a lot of French chateaus that have been purchased and have YouTube channels to help subsidize restorations, but Chateau Diaries was the first, and it's very, very well done. It's also where I first met Dan the gardener. Dan Preston was employed in the Chateau Lalande Gardens. And then a short time later, in 2022, he bought a totally ruined chateau and started his own YouTube channel called Escape to Rural France. He is almost single-handedly restoring that chateau, which had been burned and is just a shell. It's got a lot of interesting history too. Jewish children were housed there to be safe during the war. It was once owned by Coco Chanel. It's thought that the chateau was burned by an owner for the insurance money. Dan has got a lot of personality and he's an amazing videographer, and his channel is also a lot of fun to watch. Dan's Escape to Rural France vlog has actually surpassed Stephanie's Chateau Diaries in terms of subscribers. He has 474,000 subscribers, a little more than twice Chateau Diaries' 239,000. Stephanie and Dan have a good-natured rivalry going about that. Now let me give you 3 movie recommendations. The first one, All the Light We Cannot See. I read and really, really liked this book, and then I watched the movie and just loved it. There are so many World War II movies out there, but this one is really worth watching. It's about a blind French girl who meets a German soldier during the war in Nazi-occupied France. Really well done. The book by Anthony Doerr won a Pulitzer Prize. It's sort of a mini-series with 4 episodes, and you can watch it on Netflix. The Miracle Club is a movie that came out last year and stars Laura Linney, Maggie Smith, and Kathy Bates. It's set in Ireland in the 1960s, and it's about women friends who win a trip to Lourdes, and it ends up being about one of their friends' daughters also, and some old secrets and coming together. And it's just a quiet, lovely film. That one is available on Netflix, Apple TV, or Amazon Prime. Here are 2 podcasts I really like. Wiser Than Me is a podcast hosted by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who of course played Elaine on Seinfeld. Louis-Dreyfus says she created the show to counterbalance the trend of iconic women disappearing from the public eye as they age. Her guests are women mostly over 70. Jane Fonda was her first guest. She has talked to Carol Burnett, Isabel Allende, Amy Tan, others. Her interviews are so good. This week's guest, I haven't listened yet, but I will, is Bonnie Raitt, which should be really interesting. At the end of each episode, Julia always calls her mom and discusses the episode, and that's really fun too. Wiser Than Me was named Apple's Best Podcast of the Year for 2023. This year, in 2024, it won the Ambie Award for Best Interview Podcast. My last recommendation is Ghost Story. That's a serial podcast by a journalist who didn't believe in ghosts. It's sort of a documentary. It's not fiction, is what I'm saying. The host, Tristan Redman, is a seasoned journalist who didn't believe in ghosts. But weird things happened in the bedroom he lived in when he was a teenager. And many years later, he learns that the people then living in that house have seen the ghost of a faceless woman. Then he realizes that his wife's great-grandmother had long ago lived right next door to that childhood home of his, and she had been murdered, killed by 2 gunshots to the face. So he goes investigating his wife's family history, trying to solve that murder and determine if there's anything to that coincidence. It was an interesting podcast. I hope there's something there that sounds interesting to you. And if you have some book or movie or podcast or similar that you're still thinking about, drop it in the comments for us. It's so satisfying to find the good stuff. And that's why I like to share some of my favorites here from time to time. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. Bye.